And yeah, let's get into this. This is your new, is like a new project you're dreaming of. What is this?
Yeah, exactly. So, um, this ties together a lot of things. So, Versus is going to be is forming to be it's a spiritual brand, a Christian brand, but it's actually not just a brand; it's a movement. And what we want is we want more people to be on mission for Jesus.
Yeah.
And what we see is that we're not a church. We're closed on, we're closed on Sundays.
Right.
So we say that because we think churches do great things, and we're not trying to replace a church. Right. This is a for-profit company that we believe can have great impact in the world. We want it to be a brand that exists 100 years from now, and that is helping more people be on mission, the Great Commission, right? To go out and make disciples.
Right.
And I'm a newer believer. I came to faith in 2017.
Okay.
With very little mustard seeds, right? And that's when I first started kind of being like, I really think I'm starting to believe.
Yeah.
And Luis kind of similarly around the same time. He was coming in before, but that's when those seeds were starting to grow. And what happened is around 2019. In 2018, check this out. Pastor James at church says, and it's Easter, and he's like, and if who here kind of feels like they want to turn their lives over to Jesus,
right?
And everyone's eyes are closed. I'm outside in the patio out there, and I honestly raised a pinky. I wasn't willing to raise my hand.
Right. You were that new.
And I just was afraid, and and I wasn't sure, but I kind of was.
Right.
And my heart was beating. I raised a pinky, but I didn't get baptized or anything that year, and I started, leaning into a few more things. At the end of 2018, there's a call for we're going to start a Spanish service, and by 2019 at the beginning, I signed up to volunteer there, and then my wife and I go through a marriage group. It's amazing, and I met there. I met amazing people.
Right.
It did great things for my marriage, and then there's a spiritual mentor in there. His name's Richard, and so Richard he starts a men's group, and so in the men's group, then I started going a little deeper into the Word, right? Because before that I would just show up on Sundays
and just get the overall perspective of church.
And it's I mean, there's good content there. But there's going to be some verses up there. There's going to be some good teaching, but I honestly do know that once I actually started reading the Bible, once I started being in fellowship with my brothers in Christ, everything changed. Yeah. And so, but in 2019, I'm on fire for Jesus. Right. In 2018, 2019, and I meet with this with my spiritual mentor, and I'm like, he's like, "What are you working on?" I know you've been talking about you're doing new things, and I was like, "Well, I want to work on this one thing,
right?
But I'm even afraid to talk about it." And he's like, "Why? What's going on?" I was like, "Well, it's because I was like, I see that people are putting up this one brand's canvas art, and a lot of the messages in that canvas art are hustle culture, secular quotes. Nothing wrong with it. However, when I'm reading the Bible, I'm seeing all of this wisdom,
right? And
I'm like, I think so many more people,
can benefit from it.
Yeah, from realizing that, hey, that quote is actually, based over here. Yeah. And so, but I was like, but you know what, man? I was like, I don't know, man. I feel I'm usually profit motivated. This is in 2019. Yeah. My history, and I'm like, and I want to do if I'm going to do this, I want to do this for God's glory, and I don't know that my heart's I don't know. He's like, God knows where your heart is, and I was like, that scares me. Yeah. Because I'm not sure that my heart's in the right place.
Yeah. Even you were doubting yourself more than he was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a great guy. And so I was like, I'll just leave it there. Right. And to fast forward, and I started working on this brand. But what happened at the end of 2019, I started talking to Luis, and I started talking to a lot of people about hey, I really need to make a change now. Yeah. I've dropped all my consulting clients. Maybe I kept one that was convenient and easy. Right. and paid really well. And I was like, but I dropped most of them, and I didn't want to take on new clients that were only going to pay me a certain way. I want to be a revenue partner now. I'm thinking that, but I'm also kind of thinking like I want to do something new, and when I do something new, I want to have more time to serve.
Yeah.
Right. And then I have this dream like on my birthday, which is at the end of December, and in that dream, it's like that I'm going to work deeper with Luis. Now, here's the thing. From 2015 to 2019, Luis and I, we still own the business together.
Right.
We still like do life together, but on a more limited basis than like every day like we used to be we were all up in each other's business.
Yeah.
Like, like we would see each other in the morning, in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, and night. Like it was
work,
everything.
family, church, everything,
right? Yeah. But for 4 years, 2015, 2019, we're not like, and we're both thriving.
Okay.
Like he's going through his stages and like growing, and I'm going through my development and growing, and so I'm like, that scares me to work more with him, because I'm like, we've been doing well apart,
right?
And to bring it back together, I'm like, oh, that hurts.
It's gonna be a clash or something,
right? Because like I'm over here, thinking like I know something,
right? And he's gonna have his own growth and idea and experience.
But right now life is great. And we get along really well, and we've learned some stuff, but I'm kind of like, maybe we could. And then he hits me up. I go on this trip up to Big Bear Mountains for a few days, and he hits me up while I'm up there. And I had another dream right while I'm up there, and I wanted to share with him, but I was like, nah, I don't want to.
Right.
And then he hits me up, and he's like, hey, I've been thinking about working together on this like thing. I've got this idea. And I was like, oh.
You're like, you had the same thing.
And we use something called Slack. I don't know if you know Slack.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of these, like I had this dream and it scares me, and I don't know, man, but okay, I'll talk to you when I come back home.
Yeah.
And then things happen. We do start working together at church a little bit more when the Spanish service
and ministry.
Yeah, when it's kind of when he started helping out more with photography and video. And so we're kind of working a little bit more together. So I'm like, oh, maybe this is what the dream was about, right? And at this point, I'm starting to believe more that I'm starting to see that like God was always in my life, even when I wasn't able to see.
Okay.
I can look backwards and see, oh, God was there. Oh, when I raised my pinky, a year later, for in 2019, for Easter, James asks again. Oh, sorry. In 2018, when I raised my pinky, I'm at the soccer field at my kid's school. I've never seen James like outside of church ever in my life.
He was there.
The next morning, on a Monday morning, he walks up next to me. To talk to another, to a guy who I'm talking to is a good friend that I've known for a while.
Right.
And he's a member of the church, and came up to talk to him. But as I look, I'm like, oh, hey.
Like, are you the pastor?
I'm like, well, I actually used to see his videos online before I showed up in person.
Okay.
And I really connected with a lot of things he would say, which is like, he was very raw about like, hey, I didn't always believe kind of thing, like, and it's natural to this, that. So I really connect with some stuff that he was saying along those lines, let's say, right? Like he was like, I have my own doubts. That felt like, to me, like finally a person who's going to be honest about all this.
Right. Like a person of influence is actually going to be raw and real.
Because I had gone to a priest when I was younger before I got married. We got married in church. My wife wanted me to get married in church. I said, okay. I had to go do my first communion.
Wow.
And my confirmation when I'm like 27.
Oh no. Is that allowed?
Exactly.
I mean, it is.
It is.
It is?
But it's kind of weird, right?
Because you would know, like, it's usually like the younger ones, right?
Yeah.
Because because they go through it before.
It's so weird, man. But I did it. And then they're like, hey, you gotta go talk to the priest before like you can do this. And I'm like, sweet, because I have questions that the lady couldn't answer. I would ask her like some really deep questions. She's kind of like, I don't know. We just
like
believe
God and the Bible,
spirituality, but basically like faith, like like how are you so convinced about this or that? I was coming at it from a very rational, logical perspective, which. That was just how I was wired. I'm very good with math, so I was just kind of like everything was like that, like
it's there.
0 or 1, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, so James really connects with me in that way. So I'm like, whoa, you're the guy, and he's like, oh, cool, like, and now at church he sees me like, in 2019, let's say, the next year he starts seeing whatever. All right, but then in 2019 Easter, I raised my hand. I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. Next time we get baptized, I want to do this. Right? I raised my hand, and the next morning. There's been this other pastor. Do you know Tim Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah. So All of a sudden, he shows up and he's sitting at Starbucks next to me.
Oh, wow. Casually.
Yeah, and I just seen him give a talk like a week or two before.
Yeah.
And like I turn around, I'm like, hey.
Your team's got.
I'm like, I saw you, great talk, you know, for about whatever. And then I kind of like, I go back to what I'm doing. I'm like, dude, God's seeking me. I really so I'm starting to believe at this point.
Like he was putting you in the right places with the right people for you to kind of like connect or ask questions or feel connected. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I later started to see, like, once I really got involved, I started to see, all these brothers in Christ and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
They've always been around.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that was where that light was coming from. You
were already part of that community, basically.
Yeah. They were already there. I couldn't see. Right. I could feel the light.
Yeah.
Right? The salt and the light. I could feel the light, but I didn't know its source.
Right. And I think that's really important. I mean, just to like piggyback on it, how we're called, you know, to be the light and the salt, to bring impact to people through our lifestyle without having to preach on it so much.
Yeah, you're not going to Bible thump.
Right? And it's good. It's great, I think, in your experience that these people were not like shoving it in your face.
No, not at all.
You eventually, when you came to God, like you were like, oh, they were here, you know?
Yeah.
That's
really it was amazing. Yeah. So I'm starting to see these signs. I'm starting to believe.
Yeah.
And what happens is eventually I lean into these strongly. Yeah. Which made me a little uncomfortable. Made the people around me probably uncomfortable because I go from someone who didn't believe and I was like Paul. I was like Saul. Right. I was out there actively like sowing seeds of doubt in believers, being like, "But man, come on, think about this or think about come on."
Right.
Really?
You were the logical. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, you know, I go from that place to being like, no, I see it now.
Wow.
Anyways.
That's really good.
The salt and the light, right? Like, that's actually some of our first, in our one of our first episodes for Verses, like, you know, I do talk about that.
Nice.
And some of our first art that we're going to do relates to, like, what I'm bringing to the first season.
Because your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is this? You're talking about it having to be, I heard, creating quotes and canvases. Now you said it's more of it's going to be a podcast as well?
So we have a podcast.
Awesome.
Right? And we're talking about our own experience coming to faith.
Yeah.
Right? And then in ministry.
Yeah.
And now wanting to take the Great Commission and then go help empower more people.
Right.
Because, you know, we were talking earlier about stories, right?
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I strongly see is that if we wait on Sunday for someone's testimony to be shared, we might do 12 testimonies a year. I don't know, right? Because we generally don't do one every week. At most churches, we don't do. But let's say you did one every week. You did 50 testimonies. But most people don't. So let's just say 12 to 50, somewhere in between, right? And then most people, their testimony is going to be seen by a few hundred people when they get up there. Like, the few people who get up there, it'll be a few hundred people that'll see it, maybe a few thousand.
Yeah.
But most people's testimony stays within their little small circle.
Always, yeah.
All right. So one of the things that like is really on my heart is to be able to get to a place where more people are sharing their testimony.
Right.
So that instead of only like maybe a small circle that's less than 100 people, like so for me, for example.
Yeah.
Right now, if I don't go up on the stage to give my testimony somehow.
Yeah.
There's probably only been 50 to 100 people who've heard my testimony. And that's how it's going to be probably for the rest of my life. Like, that's the reach.
Wow. Yeah, it's true.
Okay. However, like, part of what we want is to be able to multiply the reach of people's testimonies, to have a platform for that. So that's like a component for later, right? Mm-hmm. There's something we think we can do later.
As a vision. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Separately, you know, a lot of people feel like they're not qualified.
Right.
Right. Like, you know, but no, like, you know, the disciples, they're just fishermen.
They're just different.
Who became a fisher of men, right? Yeah. Like, but it wasn't like they were special.
Right.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
That we're all called to go out and make disciples.
Yeah.
But most of us don't have that confidence. We don't know how. We're a little unsure. So part of our, like, okay, yeah, there's a commerce component to this, which is like, yeah, maybe you'll buy some of our art.
Right.
And that art might be through canvases, might be through hoodies. That's why there's some hoodies over here, because we're evaluating like what hoodies to use. And
are you using? You already have some different designs, and
so we're in the stages of design, and these hoodies are like the blank canvases.
Awesome.
Right, and so we see it as like but we want the best, not the best, but we want the canvas that we would want to wear. But more important, not only is it a 100-year company that we see 100-year plus, but we want the hoodie to be able to pass down. You know, just like people pass down vintage records and they pass down vintage T-shirts and everything. We think like, hey, we're gonna have seasons and there's gonna be special art based off of these, and just like art gets like. It has accrues in value, and some of the art is like the lithograph where it's like mass produced, and some of it is the original. Like we have a vision for like that kind of stuff, but
to continue transcending.
Yeah, but also kind of like, hey, when you see someone wear, so this all starts on the hoodie side. It starts with Luis. He bought a Hillsong hoodie at some event when they came in like 2018, I think, maybe 2019. I don't remember what year. And while he's out at like his son's baseball games or he's coaching or whatever, people walk up to him. And they'll be like, hey, and they'll tell them their testimony. They'll ask questions like
because they connect to the brand.
They connect to the message. It's Ephesians 3:20.
It wasn't Hilton. It was the verse.
It's a Hillsong hoodie, but it has the verse on the back.
Right. So people were connecting to the verses.
Yeah. So they'll look at the back of it and they'll come up to him, and Ephesians 3:20. Like God can do greater things you can imagine. Kind of summarizing, and so. So that's Luis's like, he's like, hey, for season 1, like this is like, let me talk to you about this. Yeah. Right. And then we also talk about a few other things, but like, so our season 1, it has not just the podcast, but also has the like, and
the merch.
Yeah. Merch.
And the verses. Well, verses, merch would land on hoodies and the canvases.
And it's the art that that'll get created based off of the verses. And we talk about the meaning about the verses, right?
That's awesome.
And then later we would like to do like, an event.
Yeah.
Maybe like a big, like anyways.
Like a live event or something, like a pop-up shop.
Yeah, and then we would love all that. We have a vision, right? And so for us, it's kind of cool now because it's like, let's go execute on it. Everything we've learned about building brands, everything we've sacrificed to get to this point is now like part of the setup for something much bigger.
Yep. I love it. And do you have it already? Is it tangible or are you launching? What is it?
So we'll launch Verses in December, the podcast.
Awesome.
And then ideally we'll have the merch to go along with it. But like kind of one of the things that you're great about is like, let's just get it out there, right? And so Luis and I actually were talking the other day, and we've taken a little bit too long. Our first conversation where like in May, I was at another retreat.
Yeah.
It was a natural point for me to go on a retreat because it had been a year since I'd been helping this brand. April's when I went on the retreat, actually. It had been a year, and I was like, it's time to think about what's next. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I can keep helping this brand, no problem. And I'm building it, and I'm building a team so they can mostly manage it.
Yeah.
I'm still involved, but mostly. But I was like, also now, what's next? Yeah. And so I was like, all right, I am going to. God's given me a lot of resources this last year, and I believe it's for His glory. It's not for me to just spend. And so, setting up this little studio here, I was like, I'm going to hire, work with an artist, invest. And when I make that decision, when I'm out in Palm Springs at a retreat, Luis messages me again. And he's like, hey, I've got this idea. Like, you've been hearing me talk about the hoodie, but what if we take the hoodie and kind of like combine it with like kind of like you've been talking about canvas art before? And I was like, dude, I just made that commitment today.
Literally just made the call.
To like I'm going forward with this.
Yeah. You guys were on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was May of this year. And so obviously we're taking too long, right? Because it should have been launched.
Right.
But we also do have, unfortunately, we have some businesses to run.
Fortunately and unfortunately.
Yeah.
Fortunately for you guys.
Exactly. So like it kind of, and this is part of the thing. Like I'm letting some things go.
Yeah.
I'm moving things around, hiring and investing to replace myself.
Yeah.
Where I can.
Right.
On the tasks that aren't as valuable. So where I can pay someone to do things that aren't as, so I can spend more time on Verses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And you know what? Like there's a big concept on like launching and taking time, but also it's not always like you said. Like I always, when I get into this zone and a mood, like I just get things done. Right. Like for example, this creators workshop, I started the Instagram and I tried to launch it like in February. So I had the first post and I didn't want to delete it. It's already like passed, but I didn't want to delete it for the timestamp, right? Because I started in February.
Yeah.
and I'm barely gonna launch it in December.
There
you know, it goes back to the same thing because it's like, yes, we go through ups and downs, but we work on different projects. You know, and one of the few reasons, and I mean, I don't know, you pour a lot. Let me see if you can resonate on something. You know, from my experience, I'm switching up because I've been doing YouTube and videos, you know, for a couple years. But it's for me as a person, it's unsustainable to do it weekly forever. You know, there's seasons that you have full-time job, you have commitments, you do other projects. Yeah. So now this is why Creators Workshops is like, okay, I'm gonna do like a 10-episode season, and I'm gonna focus all my energy. And right now, like I've been scheduling and I've been talking to people, you know, after all these months that I didn't, you know, and I'm gonna launch 10 episodes because I feel like if I try to commit to like 8 weekly, you're gonna get fresh content. Like for me, it's gonna be unsustainable. Yeah. You know, so it's cool and good to have a self-awareness, you know, and know what you're gonna produce for how long, what quality is gonna be, and launch it. And then once the 10 episodes are done, I get to like restructure, reevaluate, think, and say like, oh, maybe I want to do a summer series or maybe another winter. Yeah. Who knows? And maybe that's where you're at. You know, like you took time to launch, but you've been gathering. You know, you've been gathering information. You've been planning. You've been prepping. You got the canvases. You got your logo. It looks great. So you know, I'm like super excited to see it.
Seasons, I think it's brilliant to do a season. I mean, like the NFL does a season. The NBA, all the major leagues do seasons. Right? It gives you time to like build yourself back up. Right? We all need rest. It focuses like your energy towards promoting in a certain period. It forces you to have a calendar. Seasons are great. We want to do seasons. When I was looking at the charts of like, hey, do we want to be a top 20 Christian podcast? What's it going to take? Yeah. Right. If that's what we decide, well, we looked at like what's their publishing schedule. Yeah. Right. And we believe that we can hit it by doing our season and publishing, this many times per month. Right. Which is really once per week. So when we're in a season, we want to do once per week. Yeah. And we think that's enough. But also, like, I was listening to a guy who just became like one of the top podcasts in the world. Yeah. About how he did it, top 20 podcasts in the world, top 10. And the guy was saying, this was on, I forget what podcast, but anyways, he was saying he went on 50 podcasts.
Like he was a guest? Wow. And he just acquired.
Yeah. And actually, when Luis and I were writing out, like, what's our strategy, I told him, like, okay, look, we've got some strategy. Yeah. And part of it is we need to go be guests. So when you reached out to me, I was like, awesome.
Like, dude, this is the Lord.
Your money. Yeah. Like, you're right on time. Thank you, Lord. Right?
It's coming together. And you too, because I'm working on this and I'm like, dude, I want to get some of that knowledge and, so it just fits for both. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's that.
And are you having, is going to be you and Luis? Or are you having guests, speakers, or what are you guys?
At the beginning for first season, I don't think there's going to be guests. But, I mean, I can't wait to have guests because, but like, there's a podcast that's called Startup. Okay. I don't even know today if they're still publishing. I don't think they are. Yeah. But when this guy left a huge podcast that was from public radio, and then he went out and built it's called Gimlet, and they sold to Spotify for I think $160 million a couple years ago. Right. And they went out, or maybe a couple years ago, and they went and created a bunch of shows. But the first season was all about them building. Yeah. It was them building the podcast company.
Oh, nice. So they're talking about it and everything about the build-up.
And thus, for us, Luis and I, like yesterday or 2 days ago when we were sitting here recording, and we're going through these, like, as we bought, like, all these different brands of hoodies and, like, evaluating, like, the weight, the softness, the liner, all that. Yeah. Like, that's us talking about building. Yeah. But also us telling our story, in different parts and getting raw and, like, about, like, our journey here and, like, our ups and downs.
That's awesome. So he's also been always involved in the creative world.
Luis. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No. So Luis is actually like, I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Luis is more of your traditional artist than I am. I'm a creator. Right. But for the first so many years, I was creating code. Okay. Right. And that brought beautiful things to life. Today, coders are going to be known as artists now because they're bringing NFTs to life. Oh, yeah. Huge. Right. Digital art. They're instrumental. Right. But back in the day, it wasn't seen as art, right? But I was creating websites, I was creating like graphic design, stuff like that. But Luis actually gets down with like visual art as well. He sits there with the paint. He's had his own workshop where he paints. And
right. I think
for a while,
paintings on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, for a while that was part of like a few years that was part of his own like personal development therapy of like getting it out there, like
nice.
You know, his story, but through that art. So it kind of lined up well.
Yeah.
But you know, there's this like there's this. Well, I don't want to open too much, but there's this concept of the gap. It's Ira Glass. He runs this American Life. It's a podcast, and he says, look, when you're a beginner, you have great taste, and you want to build things that match your taste.
Right.
And then you put things out there, and they're not going to feel good. They're not going to meet your level of like expectation of taste, right? You're going to fall short. There's a gap.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to keep going.
Yeah.
And so it lends well to the like. There's this whole other concept of like the 10,000 hours by Malcolm Gladwell, which he says, to have mastery, you need to put in 10,000 hours.
Wow.
Right. And so, if the way I see it is like keep going to really simplify.
Yeah.
Right. Like don't stop. And today I think that artists have way more avenues to be able to monetize.
Yeah.
The creators have way more avenues to monetize their whatever they're building out in the world. Even create courses about how they create.
Right.
There's so many ways, right? But you just got to keep going.
Yeah.
And that's like so you got to do whatever it takes to keep going.
And eventually something will hit, and you'll get something like out of it, either experience, finances, relationships. Mm-hmm. You know, something comes from hard work. That's awesome. So I mean, just for the sake of time, because I mean, I love to continue talking. I think hopefully we continue. You know what I'm thinking? Like I'm planning already to drop the season 1. Mm-hmm. And I'm already thinking, obviously, I'm going to take some months off and everything. Mm-hmm. Season 2, but it would be great to have you and Luis for season 2.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And have the follow-up conversation. You know,
once we've launched. And
how's his verses doing?
I would love it, man.
Listen, hear Luis' story as well.
Like, Luis, like, to me, like, I've come in from on the side of, like, building a brand, from on the side of more methodical about, like, the numbers and scaling. And Luis comes in more from the side of, like, you know, vision, the art, like he consumes more on the street art,
right?
The streetwear, on the he knows the artists and stuff.
Yeah,
I peripherally know that stuff,
right?
But that's not my strong point.
You're in business.
A lot more on that, and then understanding, like, you know, kind of how to connect with people.
Okay.
Right.
Which is a great team, you know, because a lot of us, I mean, and I would consider myself more like a Luis, you know, like I know how to create. And then it sits there, and I'm like, okay, how does this get moved? You know, and this is why, like, the process of learning, like, how to put in your, you know, and obviously social media and the new internet, you know, like you said, it creates more avenues for us creators to put our work out there. Yeah. But it hasn't been that easy for people who don't have that, you know. So it's always great to partner with someone who does. Yeah, exactly. Which is awesome. And just to close, since we didn't do in the beginning, let me tell us your name. And tell us your name, your position, and what do you do for a living? Yeah, so I'm Merrick Lozano, and I'm an entrepreneur. I've been building brands for over 20 years. Yeah. And before I even know what a brand was, I was building a brand.